at WNST. I'm off to Cincinnati this week, and Luke Jones will be on the backfields for all things Ravens this week and the comings and goings. Any breaking news you'll get in our WNST text service, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. But it is also baseball season here, and Luke has been stalking out the Orioles during a very, very busy holiday period, and obviously not the direction they wanted to go in on Labor Day, heading into this Yankees thing with a loss. And I've kind of discussed the holiday weekend as a bit of a roller coaster. Would you agree with that?
I think for the Orioles, it was an absolute grind. I mean, you look at the fact they were coming off of a 7-game winning streak, which had put them right back in the thick of it. Remember, they were 4 games below. They were teetering on completely falling out of it. And then they had the huge series in Boston. They come back. They win 3 in a row from Seattle. And it looks like they're off and running. And then they run into the Toronto Blue Jays, who are a last-place team. We get that. But, a team that there were high expectations for. Expectations as high, if not higher, than what the Orioles had going into the season, of course, being a wild card team themselves. And it was just an absolute grind of a series. You look at it and you say, okay, it's a 4-game split, and yeah, it's kind of underwhelming. Yeah, you would have liked to have taken 3 of 4, but as I wrote at WNST.net, the weekend really illustrated just how tiny, how microscopic the Orioles' margin for error is right now. When you consider that, yeah, it was a 4-game split, but they came a bad pitch away on Friday, and you subtract the Wellington Castillo game-tying homer on Sunday, and then they won in extra innings. You you change those 2 variables, and you're looking at the Orioles suffering a 5th straight loss against the Yankees on Monday. I mean, not that much had to happen.
They haven't played great since the middle of last week, right?
They haven't.
And this is at home. I mean, this is where they're supposed to make their hay.
But at the same time, they're still you're still talking about the potential for a 7-3 homestand if they can win the final 2 against the Yankees, and I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. But it was very taxing, and I'll tell you how I felt about going into Monday's game, even with Dylan Bundy on the hill. When you consider that the Orioles bullpen on Friday, Saturday, Sunday had to throw a combined 18 innings, a 13-inning game on Friday, a 12-inning game on Sunday, that bullpen had to throw 18 innings over the final 3 games of that series just to win 2 of those. They were in a position on Monday that Dylan Bundy had to come out and give them 7 strong innings, and he didn't do it. And short of a monster offensive performance, which they did not get on Monday, I would have told you they had maybe a 1% chance of winning because Buck was going to stay away from 3 or 4 of his relievers who pitched a ton over the weekend. I mean, Zach Britton combined Friday and Sunday threw 53 pitches. That's something that Buck doesn't like to do, and he wasn't going to stretch that anymore.
Well, especially on the backside of injuries that have happened as well.
Sure. But
the same way he's not going to throw Bundy 120 pitches.
Right. I mean, you're just not going to see that. So there was such a cost to that Toronto series, even though it wasn't disastrous. And I mean, the good news is, L.A., the Angels lost 2 out of 3 over the weekend. The Twins lost 2 out of 3 and lost in Tampa Bay on Monday night. So they're still only a game and a half out, and we've talked about this. I mean, none of these teams are running away. I mean, the Twins have been a great story, but they've lost 3 out of their last 4 now going into Tuesday's action. So no one's running away. So
except the Indians.
well, that's different. I'm talking wild card. I mean, these wild card teams.
No, I mean the Indians are doing what the Dodgers did for a little while, incredible. And what Washington did for a little while.
They've been incredible. There's no doubt. I mean, a 12-game winning streak. Are you kidding me? I think
they might be the 1 seed before this whole thing's over. Then Houston certainly has a mess, and I know natural disasters. I'm not saying that with any jest at all, but I think Houston has a really, really tough month here ahead. I know they've responded over the weekend, but Cleveland can catch them, right?
They could, and certainly picking up Justin Verlander is huge, though. Even if Verlander hasn't had the kind of season like he did last year or when he was in his prime in Detroit. But getting back to the Orioles, a 4-game split with Toronto wasn't great. It wasn't disastrous either. But
it gets to be this time of the year, though. Because you don't have a whole lot of home games left.
Well, we got disastrous would have been to be swept by Toronto.
They've already had 5 disasters this year, and they're still in the race.
Well,
it's insane.
but that's my point. They were able to tread water, but that was at such a cost that you really saw what happened on Monday. Bundy was not effective. Even his first 3 innings where he got through and didn't give up a hit and was 3 shutout innings, if you watched him pitch, he was missing his spots. He was getting away with it, but you knew that there was a good chance the Yankees were eventually going to make him pay, and they did in the 4th inning when he gave up 3 runs, threw 37 pitches.
Man, 12 outs and 100 pitches. That's tough, man.
Yeah, I mean, if Buck had his seemingly somewhat rested bullpen, you could have made an argument to just go to someone like Michael Givens in the 5th inning there. But I can understand why he tried to squeeze a couple more outs out of Bundy. Ends up giving up a 2-run homer. They go to Castro. Castro's someone over the last 10 days that has had a few different outings of 35 or more pitches. He's been worked heavily. He wasn't very good. And then you got to a point where you're behind. It wasn't insurmountable, but they stopped hitting after the 4th inning, and you got to a point where Buck really had no choice but to start using guys like Richard Rodriguez and Donnie Hart and Gabe Yanoa, because you weren't going to try to stretch your best relievers even more when you were behind by a few runs. You weren't hitting. You knew what waited with the Yankees back end of the bullpen, and it just it was one of those games that you could tell.
It got away. I mean, they were ahead early, right?
They were. I mean, they had the 3-0 lead. That was great. If they scored 6 or 7 runs, then it would have been a different story.
Every night you could say that, though. That's what they need to do to win.
Well,
except on Friday.
But that's why I said Bundy had to give them length, and no one could have or should have expected him to replicate what he did last week. I mean, that was absolutely brilliant. That was the best pitching performance the Orioles have had since Eric Bedard's big game back in 2007. I mean, he was absolutely brilliant. No one could have expected that again, but him having the extra day of rest, you were really hoping he could give you an absolute minimum of 6. Would have loved to get 7 from him, and then you could have pieceworked the final 2. O'Day could have given them an inning. Richard Blyer probably was available. Brock didn't throw a ton of pitches on Sunday. So they probably had enough for 2 innings if they had a lead, but it just kind of snowballed. So the one saving grace from Monday's loss, as much as all these games are critical and you don't want to be dropping any games at this point, you're going to lose some games, but it can't be very many at this point, with the days dwindling pretty rapidly here. But the one saving grace was they were able to rest some of their most reliable arms, and they're going to need them the next 2 days. I mean, you got Hellickson, who has been either good or horrendous. There's really been no middle road with him since being acquired from Philadelphia. And then you have Gausman in the finale, which you feel pretty good about that. The way Gausman's pitched, for the most part,
better since the All-Star break, right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he's been really, really good, save for 2 bad outings. And I've hammered home the point. Caleb Joseph, his personal catcher. You need to stay with that because it's worked. But even Gausman going up against Sonny Gray in the finale, so that's shaping up to be a pretty good pitching performance. But runs at probably going to be at a premium, and that leads me to another point. As much as we kind of talk about the pitching, this offense that was just blistering in the month of August, just 12 runs over the last 4 days, and given where they've been, given the reality with their starting pitching staff.
And this is a last place team they're facing, too.
I mean, it's they got to be a little bit better than that. And even on Monday, they got to Jordan Montgomery early, but they didn't have a hit after the 4th inning until late in the game when Castillo hits the home run when they were already behind 4 runs. So the offense needs to be better. The formula is very clear for this team, even if it's not an easy one. They have to score runs at a very prolific rate. They have to be an above-average offense, which they have been in the second half. It's why they've gotten back into it, and they need their bullpen to protect short leads or narrow leads late in games. The starting rotation, we know it is not leading them into October. I mean, anyone who thinks that the starting rotation is going to start being dramatically better is kidding themselves. You feel really good about Dylan Bundy, save for Monday, even though you have to get him some extra rest. That's just the reality. I mean, this guy has already thrown up over 150 innings this season, which is blowing away his high from last year.
And we're going to talk about that when he goes out there and struggles like he did on Monday.
Sure. And we're going to talk about the fact that he had a 5+ ERA in September last year. So you have Bundy, who is your best starter, who is your de facto ace, even if he's not a true ace in the traditional sense that you'd like him to be. but he's been really good, especially in his first full year as a starter. But we know that they've had to try to get some extra days of rest for him. So what's the hidden cost there? They've had to continue to start guys like Chris Tillman and Ubaldo Jimenez, which the fact that they're still making starts in September is an organizational failure top to bottom. That said, this team has still found a way to be in it. And as much of it might be a product of everyone else being really mediocre, here we are. The starting rotation in August, it had an ERA of 4.86, which is not great by any stretch. It's still below average, but it's not horrendous. It's not disastrous like it was the second half of May through the month of July. And they were able to average about 5.7 innings per start rather than about 5 flat, which they were closer to the previous 2 months. If this starting rotation can be good enough to keep them in games, keep them engaged, and not completely wreck their bullpen, and it's not as though the starting rotation did that in the Toronto series. It was more a product of the offense not scoring runs and going into extra innings and having to win a 1-0 game on Friday night in 13 innings and having to win 5-4 in 12 innings on Sunday. But the formula's simple. The offense has to be really good. The bullpen has to do its thing, and the starting rotation has to be mediocre enough to not completely compromise that bullpen. And people will say, okay, well, you have a September expanded roster. Yes, you do. And when you're pitching in blowouts, whether you're way ahead or way behind, then you're in a position where you can use those guys. But you do not want to be in a position where you're having to use a Richard Rodriguez or, and even though he did a good job on Friday and Sunday, you don't want to have to use Jimmy Yacobonis in a tie game in extra innings. But when your starting rotation's not getting deep into games, that's what you start to deal with. And it's just there's such a minuscule margin for error for this team that hey, they're still in it. Give them credit. Many of us did not think that they would be playing very relevant baseball.
Oh, here we are, man. We're talking Bengals this week, and we have very, very relevant Oriole baseball. And I would say this, Luke, and the ups and the downs of this thing. I've written Kansas City off a week or two ago. I wrote Seattle off after they started losing here, right? We've written the Orioles off. We've probably written off Tampa already again, right? And I know we wrote Minnesota off when they were sellers, for crying out loud. All of these teams are in this thing. Dude, there might be 4 teams tied at the end of this, right? Like, this could really be the nightmare of all nightmares for baseball and for the scheduling in the first week of October.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you just look at this thing. I mean, basically all of those teams, other than Toronto. I mean, Toronto's 10 games under 500 right now. They're done. I mean, short of them winning, pulling a Cleveland Indians and winning 13 in a row or something like that, they're done. So, but the rest of those teams, and clearly you would handicap the Twins, the Angels, the Orioles having a better chance than the Rays right now. But again, the Rays are only a game and a half behind the Orioles,
and plenty of games left with the Orioles.
I mean, it's just and you can look at schedule, and we've talked. You and I've gotten into this a little bit. You look at the Twins; they're playing the Central, and you say, okay, they should have an advantage there. But then you see they lost 2 out of 3 to Kansas City. Which the Royals were written off, and they've won their last 2, and they're back to 500. I mean, there's just such mediocrity there. And, I've used this example multiple times, but it's just like in the NFL when you're talking about a bunch of 6 and 7 teams trying to get that last wild card spot because you have a few really good teams and everyone else is pretty similar. Not good, but not bad. And, that's what you have here. So, I mean, the Orioles, they did what they needed to do to put themselves right back in it with that 7-game winning streak. Since then, they've gone 2-3. It's not disastrous, but it's not what you'd like. And they can, if they win the last 2 against the Yankees here, you take 2 out of 3, you finish up a 7-3 homestand. You're feeling really good about things. If they drop one of the next 2 and they lose, or heaven forbid they get swept, then you're looking at this thing going back on the road. You're looking at this thing looking pretty bleak, pretty dire again. So this is the time of year where we always talk about it. It's just like the beginning of the season. That's that small sample size territory where it's a sprint. It's no longer that marathon so much. Who can get hot? Who can sustain something? The Orioles. They've been very well served to win 9 of their last 12, but they have to continue that. And you'd really, really like to get these last 2 against the Yankees before you go back out on the road. And knowing what kind of issues they've had on the road. Hey, reality is they're going to have to win some road games. I mean, it's that simple. They did it in Boston last weekend, to their credit, but they're going to have to go out on a road trip and, at the very least, at the absolute worst, tread water. But if you want to give yourself a good chance and not just say, well, we're in it, you got to go out and have a winning road trip, and it's not going to be easy. Certainly, when you look at the teams, some of the teams are going to be playing here over the final month, but that's where they find themselves. When you play as poorly as they did for about 2.5 months, that becomes your reality. So you got to try to take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees here, and then go to Cleveland, which is not going to be easy whatsoever. But maybe if you're a believer in the law of averages, you say, well, Cleveland can't keep winning at this rate forever. So maybe you get them cooling off a little bit, but then you go to Toronto, where we know what kind of issues the Orioles have had there over the last few years, even though the Blue Jays aren't as good this year. And then that big 4-game set against the Yankees at the end of next week. This is a pretty. It's going to be pretty clear over the next week and a half or so from the time that they come home Monday, September 18th against the Red Sox. Probably have a pretty good idea at that point. Maybe they'll still be in this mishmash of mediocrity here. Maybe none of these teams runs away. But if you feel like the Orioles are going to put themselves in the driver's seat, it's going to be doing some stellar work over the next 10 days or so.
He is Luke Jones. He will be following the Orioles. Do you feel like they're going to make the play? I mean, do you have any vibe? I know we had a good vibe a week ago, and it's a weekend where, to your point, they couldn't get out of their own way and had to play all night, and Jimmy Yacobonis is playing the role of Phil Regan and the Vulture here all weekend long, and here come the Yankees to bloody their nose a little bit to start the holiday. It's such a roller coaster ride, but I feel like some team here is going to win 6 out of 7 at some point. And I know the Orioles did that 2 weeks ago to get themselves into the conversation, but one of these teams is going to have to get hot to do this. I don't know that the Orioles can be that team given this pitching right now, right?
Well, but we would have said that 10 days ago, and or 2 weeks ago, and then they won 7 in a row, including going up the Fenway and sweeping 3 in a row. So, I mean, put it this way. Do I feel better about the Orioles than the other teams that we've discussed? No. Do I really feel worse about the Orioles? Do I view those other teams as being in better position than them? Okay, I guess you'd say the Twins, because they're the team that's leading right now by the skin of their teeth, with the Angels just a half game behind them going into Tuesday. But I think the one thing that you do look at, and this is something that, as you know me, I'm a baseball nerd. I like stats. I don't apologize for that. But this is also a time of year when you start to look at some intangibles, and you look at these other teams, the Twins, the Angels, not very playoff tested, not really battle tested. The Angels a few years ago were in it, but they haven't been since then. The Rangers, who last year was a great story, but they haven't been able to recapture that magic of all those one-run wins. Seattle, they've been a paper tiger, I think, in a lot of people's minds for 3 or 4 years. I've heard them picked at various times in the West, and they've never put it together. Kansas City, certainly they have a pedigree that you would say exceeds what the Orioles have done, because they have won a championship. And
this is their last turn at the rodeo for those
guys,
right?
They have that kind of that urgency factor. But one thing the Orioles have done pretty well under Buck Showalter over this time, for the most part, they played good baseball in September. And how much of it is Buck being able to manipulate a deeper bullpen and doing some things that way? How much of it is...
He doesn't have to hide guys in hotel rooms in various places.
He can just bring them up now. Right. How much of it is having some battle-tested guys who have played in a lot of meaningful games? I think there is some intangible value there that you can't quantify, but I would give the Orioles the edge in the intangible category compared to a few of those teams. But as I said, it's very simple. They got to hit the ball. Their bullpen has to do the job. Their bullpen over the last 2 or 3 weeks had a couple hiccups. Now, they did a heck of a job on Friday night and Sunday afternoon. Now, you got to give them a world of credit for that. But, can they continue that? And the biggest factor, no, the starting rotation isn't going to be the reason they win. I think anyone would be kidding themselves to think that's going to change. But it can't be the thing that sabotages their bullpen to the point where you're having to pitch guys like Richard Rodriguez and Yacobonis and Donnie Hart in high leverage situations. The rotation, it has to be competitive. Get them to the 5th or 6th inning. Yeah, you'd love, in a perfect world, you'd love to have guys that get into the 7th or 8th inning and guys that are able to pitch 7 shutout innings and allow you to win 2-1 games. But this team's just not constructed that way, and a lot of it's their own shortcomings as an organization. Why that is, but it's just where they are right now. So can they get just enough out of that rotation to make their strengths, their relative strengths, really matter? They were able to do it in August. That's why they had a winning month. That's why they were able to get themselves back into serious contention for this second wild card spot. But if they're going to continue to be in serious contention for their second wild card spot, they can't have 3 and 4 inning outings, 4 inning outings like they got from Chris Tillman Sunday and like they got from Bundy. I mean, you might
with
be able
Tillman.
to
I don't know what you expect anymore.
Sure.
The only reason you're sending him out there is to give Bundy an extra day.
Sure.
Literally.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, the hidden cost to have Bundy getting that extra rest. It's not a hidden cost. It's a very visible cost. Is having Tillman or Jimenez pitching or whoever else they might give the ball to at some point here in the month of September. Who knows? But if you're going to do that, it compromises your chances in that game. And then when Bundy does pitch, if he has an outing like he did on Monday, and again, I don't want to beat up Dylan Bundy too much. He's not the reason why this team is barely hanging on and is in the position they're in right now, where they're just kind of sort of barely contending in this muddled group of wild card contenders. But if you're going to give him the extra rest, that's what made Monday so deflating. I mean, if he'd gotten them 6 or 7 innings, even if he'd given up 3 or 4 runs, if the pitch count had been more reasonable, if he wasn't walking guys, I mean, this team walked 10 batters on Monday. I mean, it's unacceptable. You're not going to win games like that short of scoring 10 runs. So, but if they can get through each turn through the rotation with maybe only having one of those short starts, and then guys like Miley can be okay can at least give you a 5 or 6. I think they have a decent shot at this thing. If they're going to kind of revert to where their pitching was a couple months ago, then I think you'll see them fall out of this thing pretty quickly. So,
well, they get their hands full here next couple of days because the Yankees are playing for real here. I mean, like they're giving a real chase to the Red Sox. That's where they are. That's where their heads. It's got to be not playing this crazy 1-game playoff, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean the Yankees are just with Boston having now lost 3 straight again. I mean clearly that's a team that that looked like they were on the cusp of running away with it a few weeks ago, and we've kind of seen them go into that tailspin, and certainly the Orioles played a part in that for them.
Sure.
But yeah, the Yankees, they would no team wants to be in this 1-game playoff. I mean, if the alternative is not being in the playoffs, yeah, you love the 1-game playoff, you love the wild card, but that's why they have the system that they do. And I know a lot of people, including myself, didn't love the idea of a 1-game playoff with adding the second wild card, but it's added that much more importance to winning the division. I mean, when you win the division, you're guaranteed of a 5-game series. Now, a 5-game series is very short. The Detroit Tigers can attest to that with the way the Orioles disposed of them when a lot of people were saying they were the favorite way back in 2014 there, but you don't like the idea of playing as hard and as well as you do for 162 games for it to come down to a coin flip. I mean, which is basically what a wild card game is. Even the team that has the advantage, you're talking maybe a 58% chance to win rather than 50-50. Even if you're talking about a pretty distinct pitching advantage. So, the Yankees have a lot to play for. They haven't been as good as they had been early in the season when their offense was going nuts. But they've won 3 in a row now. Certainly had to be impressed with what they did against the Orioles on Monday, much to the chagrin of fans who came out there on Labor Day.
CC making all the dough, and Gray in the in now the Yankees Grays instead of the Oakland Grays. We'll get a pennant race baseball here. The Orioles with a couple of games left. Luke Jones is going to be around for that. Obviously on the backfields in Owings Mills doing double duty as we prepare for the Ravens in Cincinnati. And nice win for the Terps over the weekend down in Austin. So we have plenty of things we're going to be getting to here this week as we preview the Bengals. We're going to be looking at the Indians this weekend as the Orioles head out to Cleveland. So Orioles in Northern Ohio and the Ravens in Southern Ohio this weekend. I am here in Baltimore for you out on the internet. Anywhere you go, we go in the buy at Toyota.com. Audio of all 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Morning newspaper comes each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness. Make sure you're getting that. Last but not least, our tech services, our breaking news service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And of course, the Ravens have had lots of comings and goings here over the holiday weekend, and the Orioles are certainly going to be moving their roster around as well as we've expanded to 40 now. You'll get it all first on the WNST Tech Service. Dennis is here, by the way, on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready for real football this weekend in Cincinnati. I am Nestor Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports